The Night That Changed Everything. A chef's story of compassion and unexpected miracles. I never believed in fairy tales, not the kind where princes arrive on white horses or where wishes come true with a wave of a magic wand. Life had taught me that miracles were rare and survival required hard work, sacrifice, and an unwavering determination to keep moving forward, even when the world felt impossibly heavy on your shoulders. My name is Emma Richardson, and I'm a chef. Not the kind you see on television with gleaming restaurants and Michelin stars. Just a woman who loves to cook, who pours her heart into every dish, and who runs a modest restaurant in Denver, Colorado. Emma's table isn't fancy. The chairs are mismatched, the walls could use a fresh coat of paint, and the heating system makes strange noises when winter arrives. But it's mine. Every sauce that simmers on that stove, every loaf of bread that emerges golden from the oven, every smile I manage to coax from a weary customer, it all carries a piece of my soul. February in Denver can be unforgiving, the kind of cold that seeps through your coat and settles in your bones, making you wonder if spring is just a beautiful lie we tell ourselves to survive winter. That particular Tuesday evening in February 2024, the weather forecast had been warning about a massive snowstorm for days. By 6 o'clock, the snow was already falling in thick, heavy sheets that transformed the familiar streets into an alien landscape of white. I had sent my small staff home early. Maria, my sous chef, had 3 children waiting for her. Tommy, our dishwasher who was putting himself through community college, needed to get home before the roads became impassable. "Go," I told them, perhaps more firmly than necessary. "I'll close up. This storm isn't playing around." The truth was, I welcomed the solitude. My mind was heavy that evening, weighted down by thoughts I couldn't escape, no matter how many orders I filled or how busy I kept my hands. My mother, Catherine, was sick. Not the kind of sick that resolves with rest and chicken soup, but the kind that requires words like aggressive treatment and experimental protocol and significant financial investment. Stage 4. Those 2 words had become the soundtrack of my nightmares. The doctors at Denver General had been honest, almost brutally so. There were treatments available, cutting-edge immunotherapy that showed promise, but insurance would only cover a fraction of the cost. The rest, approximately $2.5 million, would be our responsibility. Our responsibility. As if I had that kind of money hidden under my mattress. If you've been finding hope in this story, I'd be so grateful if you could take a moment to like this video and subscribe to our channel. Your support means the world and helps us share more stories of unexpected kindness. I was wiping down the counter for the 3rd time, my mind running through impossible calculations, when I heard it. A sound that cut through the howling wind outside. An engine, struggling and sputtering. Then silence, then voices, muffled but urgent. I moved to the front window and peered through the glass, now almost completely obscured by snow. Through the white chaos, I could make out the dark shape of a vehicle, a large pickup van that looked like it had seen better days. The hazard lights blinked weakly, a desperate SOS in the storm's fury. For a moment I hesitated. The restaurant was closed. I was alone. Every sensible instinct told me to stay inside, to call for help, and let the professionals handle whatever situation was unfolding outside. But then I saw them. Shadows moving around the vehicle, human shapes hunched against the wind, and I knew that help might not arrive in time. Not in this storm. Not when visibility was nearly 0 and the temperature was dropping into the dangerous negatives. I grabbed my heavy coat, wound my scarf around my face, and pushed open the door. The wind hit me like a physical force, nearly knocking me backward. Snow stung my exposed skin, and the cold was so intense it burned. "Hello?" I shouted, my voice barely audible over the storm. "Is anyone there? Do you need help?" The shapes moved toward me, resolving into the forms of men. 8 of them, clustered together for warmth. Even through the snow, I could see they were in trouble. Their coats, though expensive-looking, were inadequate for this kind of weather. Several were shaking violently, the kind of trembling that speaks of a body losing its battle against the cold. "Our van broke down," one of them shouted, his voice tight with cold and what might have been fear. "We've been trying to restart it for 20 minutes. The heater's dead. Our phones have no signal. He broke off, his teeth chattering so hard he couldn't continue. I didn't think. I simply acted. Inside, I commanded, gesturing toward the restaurant. "All of you now, quickly." They didn't need to be told twice. One by one, they stumbled through the door I held open, snow falling from their coats in chunks, their faces red and raw from the cold. I counted as they entered. 8 men, just as I'd thought, ranging in age from perhaps 40 to 70. They were well dressed underneath their inadequate outerwear, I noticed absently. Expensive watches, quality shoes, the kind of subtle markers of wealth that you learn to recognize when you've spent years in the service industry. But in that moment, they weren't wealthy or powerful or anything except cold and frightened and human. And that was all that mattered. "Sit anywhere," I told them, closing the door firmly against the storm and twisting the lock. "I need to get the heat up and make you something warm to drink. Don't move around too much yet. We need to warm you up gradually." I cranked up the thermostat and hurried to the kitchen, my chef's instincts taking over. Hot liquids first, not coffee, which could dehydrate, but warm broths and herbal teas. I put several pots on the stove, filling them with water and soup base, setting tea kettles to boil. Then I grabbed every blanket I could find, the ones I kept for outdoor seating in milder weather, my own emergency blanket from my car, even the tablecloths that could serve as makeshift wraps. When I returned to the dining room, carrying an armload of blankets and followed by the fragrant steam of brewing tea, I found the 8 men had naturally gravitated toward 2 tables pushed together near the center of the room. They were starting to relax slightly, though several still trembled. "Here," I said, distributing blankets. "Wrap up. I have tea coming in just a moment, and soup shortly after that. We need to get your core temperatures up safely." "You're an angel," one of them said, an older gentleman with silver hair and kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. "We thought," his voice caught, "we genuinely thought we might not make it." "You're safe now," I assured him, tucking a blanket around his shoulders with the same care I'd have shown my own mother. "The storm is bad, but this building is solid, and we have heat and food. You'll be fine. If this story is touching your heart, I'd really appreciate it if you'd hit that like button and subscribe. It helps us continue bringing you these meaningful stories." Over the next hour, I worked steadily, moving between kitchen and dining room, bringing out cups of warm ginger tea with honey, then bowls of rich beef and vegetable soup, then fresh bread with butter, then pasta with herbs and olive oil. I couldn't help myself. Feeding people is what I do, and these men needed nourishment as much as they needed warmth. As color returned to their faces and the violent shaking subsided, they began to talk, first to me, thanking me profusely, and then to each other. I learned their names: Robert, James, William, David, Michael, Thomas, Christopher, and Richard. They were in Denver for a conference, they explained, and had rented a van to drive to a dinner meeting in Boulder. They should have canceled when the storm warnings intensified, but they'd thought they could beat the worst of it. "Pride before a fall," Robert, the silver-haired man, said ruefully. "We thought we were invincible, I suppose, or at least that our schedule was more important than the weather forecast. We nearly paid the ultimate price for that arrogance." "You're here now," I said simply. "That's what matters. And you'll stay here until the storm passes, and it's safe to travel. I have plenty of food, and the heat is working fine. You'll be comfortable enough." "You're remarkably calm about having 8 strangers invade your restaurant," James observed. He was younger than Robert, perhaps in his early 50s, with sharp features and an assessing gaze that suggested he was accustomed to reading people. I shrugged, refilling his teacup. "I've worked in restaurants since I was 16. I'm used to thinking on my feet and handling unexpected situations. Besides, this isn't an invasion. It's an emergency. You needed help, and I was here to provide it. It's as simple as that." But it wasn't simple. Not really. As the evening deepened into night and the storm continued its relentless assault on the city, something shifted in that dining room. Perhaps it was the intimacy forced by circumstance, or the way facing mortality together strips away pretense, or simply the strange magic that sometimes happens when people are removed from their normal contexts and forced to be fully present with one another. They asked about me, and I found myself answering with an honesty that surprised me. I told them about the restaurant, about my journey from line cook to chef to owner, about the struggles and triumphs of running a small business in an increasingly corporate world. I told them about my philosophy of food as love made tangible, about my belief that a good meal can provide comfort and connection that transcends language or background. And then, perhaps because the night felt suspended outside of normal time, or because I needed to say the words aloud to make them feel real, I told them about my mother. She raised me alone, I said, my hands wrapped around my own cup of tea, staring into the amber liquid as if it held answers. My father left when I was 3. She worked 2 jobs, sometimes 3, to keep us afloat. She never complained, never made me feel like I was a burden, never let me see her struggle, even though I know now how hard it must have been. I took a shaky breath. She taught me to cook. Not fancy restaurant cooking, just good, honest food made with care. She taught me that feeding someone is an act of love, that you put your heart on a plate and offer it to others. Everything I am, everything I've built, is because of her. She sounds like a remarkable woman, Christopher said softly. He was the youngest of the group, perhaps only a few years older than my own 42 years. She is, I said, and then the words I'd been holding back spilled out. She's also dying. Stage 4 cancer. There's a treatment that could help, a new immunotherapy protocol that's showing real promise, but it's experimental and insurance won't cover most of it. The cost is... I stopped, suddenly embarrassed. These were strangers. They didn't need to know the impossible mathematics of my desperation. Please take a moment to like and subscribe if you're finding value in this story. Your support truly makes a difference in helping us share these tales of humanity and hope. How much? Robert asked quietly. I shouldn't have answered. It wasn't their problem. But the question was asked with such gentle directness that I found myself responding. $2.5 million. I've been trying to raise it. I set up a fundraiser. I've been taking every catering job I can find. I've been looking into loans and grants and every possible avenue. But time is running out, and I'm nowhere close to what I need. The silence that followed wasn't uncomfortable. It was thoughtful, heavy with unspoken understanding. Finally, William spoke. You opened your restaurant on a night when you should have gone home, stayed late to close up properly, and then risked your own safety to help 8 complete strangers, all while carrying that weight. What else would I do? I asked, genuinely confused by the question. Leave you outside to freeze? My problems don't make other people's emergencies less urgent. Michael, who had been quiet for most of the evening, shook his head slowly. That level of compassion, that instinct to help others even when you're struggling yourself, it's rarer than you might think. Especially in my experience. I didn't know what to say to that, so I did what I always do when emotions threaten to overwhelm me. I went back to the kitchen and cooked. I made more food than 8 men could possibly eat. Roasted chicken with herbs, garlic mashed potatoes, sautéed vegetables, apple pie with cinnamon and vanilla. I cooked like I was feeding my family because in that strange suspended night, that's what they felt like. We talked for hours. They told me about their own lives. Carefully, I noticed, avoiding specific details about their work, though I caught references that suggested successful careers. They asked thoughtful questions about the restaurant business, about Denver, about my vision for Emma's Table if resources were unlimited. They shared stories of their own families, their own struggles, the moments that had shaped them. Around midnight, the storm began to ease. The wind's howl dropped to a moan, and the snow, while still falling, no longer seemed intent on erasing the world. We could see streetlights again, fuzzy halos of gold in the white darkness. I should check on your van, I said, though I suspected it would need professional help, and see if the roads are passable yet. We've already called for help, James said, holding up his phone, which apparently had regained signal. A tow truck will come in the morning, and we've arranged for transportation back to our hotel. But Emma, he paused, his expression serious. Thank you. Truly. You saved our lives tonight, and you did it with such grace and generosity. We won't forget this. They left early the next morning, after I'd made them breakfast, omelets and fresh pastries and strong coffee to fortify them for the journey. Each of them thanked me warmly, several with embraces that felt genuine rather than perfunctory. Robert, the last to leave, took my hands in his. You remind me that there's still real goodness in this world, he said. Thank you for that gift. And then they were gone, climbing into a large SUV that had arrived to collect them, disappearing into the morning light that made the snow-covered city sparkle like something from a dream. I cleaned the restaurant, washing dishes and folding blankets and returning everything to its proper place. I felt strange, hollow and full at the same time, exhausted but energized. I'd helped people. I'd made a difference. For one night, I'd been able to set aside my own worries and simply do what I do best: care for others through food and warmth. I didn't expect anything more than that satisfaction. The idea that there might be any lasting consequence to that night beyond the memory of human connection never crossed my mind. If you're enjoying this journey, please consider liking this video and subscribing to the channel. Your engagement helps these stories reach more people who need to hear them. The next morning, Thursday, February 15th, 2024, started like any other. I woke at 6, made my coffee, and went through my routine of checking emails and preparing for the day ahead. Out of habit, I logged into my bank account to check the restaurant's balance, mentally calculating what bills needed to be paid and what supplies needed to be ordered. I stared at the screen, blinked, refreshed the page, stared again. The number didn't change. It couldn't be real. It was impossible. $5 million. My checking account, which had contained roughly $12,000 the day before, now showed a balance of $5,012,037. My hands started shaking so badly I had to set down my coffee cup. This had to be an error. A terrible, cruel banking mistake that would be corrected within hours, leaving me more devastated than if I'd never seen that number at all. I called the bank. I was transferred 3 times before reaching someone who could help me. Yes, the deposit was real. Yes, it had cleared. No, there was no mistake. It had been wired from a corporate account the previous evening, and the transaction was legitimate and complete. "Who sent it?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. The banker gave me a corporate name I didn't recognize, something to do with investment holdings. "There's also a note attached to the transfer," she added. "Would you like me to read it to you?" "Yes, please." Her voice was professional but warm as she read, "For Catherine's treatment, and for the angel who reminds us what true generosity looks like. You saved 8 lives. Please allow us to save the one that matters most to you. With deepest gratitude and respect, your guests from the storm." I don't remember hanging up the phone. I don't remember the tears that must have started immediately, or the sound I must have made, something between a sob and a laugh, relief and disbelief tangled together. I only remember sitting on my kitchen floor, holding my phone, repeating thank you over and over to the empty room, as if the words could somehow travel to wherever those 8 men were and convey even a fraction of what I felt. $5 million. Not just enough for my mother's treatment, but double what I needed. Enough to cover any complications, any additional care, any possibility. Enough to make sure she would have every chance, every option, every hope. I called my mother. She was still at her apartment. She'd refused to move in with me, insisting she didn't want to be a burden, though I visited every day and we spoke multiple times each day. "Mom," I said, and my voice broke on the word. "Mom, we can do it. The treatment, everything. We can do it all." "Emma, sweetheart, we've talked about this," she said gently. "The fundraising is going as well as can be expected, and we'll figure something out." "No, Mom, you don't understand. It's done. The money is here. All of it. More than we need. We can start the treatment immediately." The silence on the other end of the line stretched so long, I thought we'd been disconnected. Then I heard her breath catch, a sound of fragile hope. "How?" I told her. I told her everything. About the storm, the 8 men, the night in the restaurant, the confession I'd made about her illness. I told her about the deposit, the note, the impossible gift that had appeared like something from a fairy tale I'd stopped believing in years ago. When I finished, she was crying. So was I. "Emma," she whispered, "your kindness, your beautiful heart, it came back to you." It came back. If this story has moved you, I hope you'll take a second to like and subscribe. These moments of human connection are what this channel is all about. The next few weeks were a blur. We got Mom started on the treatment immediately. The doctors were optimistic. Starting early, before the cancer could progress further, significantly improved her chances. I found myself splitting my time between the restaurant and the hospital, cooking meals for her when the treatments left her too nauseated to eat hospital food, sitting beside her during infusions, celebrating every small victory and supporting her through the difficult days. But something else happened too. I couldn't stop thinking about those 8 men. They had given me the most precious gift imaginable, and I didn't even know their full names or how to reach them. The corporate entity that had made the transfer was deliberately opaque, designed, I suspected, to protect their privacy. It bothered me. Not knowing who they were, not being able to thank them properly, not understanding how or why they'd decided to help with such extraordinary generosity. The note said I'd saved 8 lives, but that felt like an exaggeration. They'd have been uncomfortable, certainly, maybe even in danger for a while, but surely someone else would have helped them eventually. They were well-dressed, apparently wealthy men in a major city. They wouldn't have been abandoned, would they? The question haunted me until I finally gave in and did what I probably should have done from the beginning. I searched online for conferences in Denver during that storm. There had been several, but one stood out: a CEO summit for Fortune 500 companies held at the downtown convention center. My hands trembled as I clicked through the attendee list, and there they were, all 8 of them. Robert Harrison, CEO of Harrison Enterprises, a manufacturing conglomerate worth billions. James Mitchell, founder and chairman of Mitchell Tech Solutions, one of the largest technology firms in the country. William Chen, CEO of Chen Global Investments. David Rodriguez, president of Rodriguez Pharmaceuticals. Michael O'Brien, CEO of O'Brien Energy Corporation. Thomas Anderson, founder of Anderson Media Group. Christopher Johnson, CEO of Johnson Aerospace. Richard Williams, chairman of Williams Financial Holdings. I stared at the screen, at their professional headshots and impressive titles, and felt something like vertigo. These weren't just successful businessmen. These were 8 of the most powerful CEOs in America. Combined, the companies they led were worth hundreds of billions of dollars. They influenced markets, shaped industries, employed hundreds of thousands of people. And I'd served them soup and tucked blankets around their shoulders and told them about my sick mother. The sheer improbability of it made me laugh, a slightly hysterical sound in my quiet apartment. Of all the restaurants in Denver, of all the possible places their van could have broken down, they'd ended up outside mine. And instead of revealing who they were, which surely would have guaranteed excellent treatment, they'd simply been 8 cold, frightened men accepting help from a stranger. Why hadn't they told me? The question buzzed in my mind. They must have known that dropping $5 million into someone's account was extraordinary, borderline unbelievable. They must have known I'd want to thank them, to express my gratitude properly. Yet they'd deliberately structured the gift to maintain their anonymity, unless anonymity was the point. Unless they hadn't wanted gratitude or recognition, or the complicated dynamics that would have emerged if I'd known who they were that night. Unless they'd wanted to give freely, without expectation of anything in return, just as I'd helped them without knowing who they were or what they could do for me. Please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to our channel. Your support allows us to keep sharing stories that remind us of the good in humanity. 3 months passed. My mother's treatment was going well, better than the doctors had dared hope. The tumors were shrinking. Her energy was returning. She'd started talking about the future again, making plans, dreaming of the things she wanted to do when she was healthy. "I want to travel," she told me one afternoon in May, sitting in my restaurant after her latest scan had come back with encouraging results. "I've spent my whole life working, sacrificing, being practical. I want to see the ocean, the mountains. I want to have adventures." "You will," I promised her, squeezing her hand. "We both will." The restaurant was doing well too. I'd invested some of the extra money into improvements, nothing extravagant, but a new oven, updated furniture, a fresh coat of paint that made the whole space feel renewed. Business had picked up, perhaps because of the energy I brought to it now, no longer weighted down by constant worry. I'd also started a program offering free meals every Thursday evening to anyone who needed them. No questions asked, no means testing, just good food served with dignity to whoever walked through the door. It felt right, like completing a circle of generosity. I was in the kitchen on a Tuesday evening in late May when Maria came back looking flustered. Emma, there are some gentlemen here who'd like to speak with you. They said they're old friends, but they don't have a reservation. Something in her tone made me look up sharply. How many gentlemen? 8 of them. My heart stopped, then started again at double speed. I wiped my hands on my apron, suddenly nervous, and walked out to the dining room. They were there, all 8 of them, standing near the entrance, looking simultaneously confident and uncertain. Robert saw me first, and his face broke into a warm smile. "Hello, Emma," he said. "We were hoping you might have room for 8 unexpected guests." I couldn't speak. Emotion clogged my throat. Gratitude and joy and relief, and a dozen other feelings I couldn't name. I managed a nod and led them to the large table near the center of the room, the same area where we'd sat that snowy night. For a moment, we all just looked at each other. Then Christopher broke the silence. "We wanted to check on you, to see how your mother is doing. We've been thinking about you." "She's doing wonderfully," I managed, my voice thick. "The treatment is working. She's going to be okay, because of you, because of all of you." "We had a discussion the morning we left," Robert said quietly, "about what we'd experienced here, about the kind of person who opens their doors in a storm without hesitation, who shares their struggles and their food and their warmth without expecting anything in return. We agreed that if we couldn't be that kind of person ourselves, the least we could do was support someone who embodied everything we admired." "But why so much?" I asked. "Not that I'm complaining. God, I'm so grateful I can barely breathe. But you didn't just cover the treatment. You gave me more than I could possibly need." James leaned forward. "Because we wanted you to be able to focus on your mother without financial stress. Because we wanted you to be able to improve your restaurant if you chose. Because we wanted you to have options and freedom. And because—" He paused, glancing at the others. "Because 8 lives are worth at least that much, and you saved all of ours." "I didn't save your lives," I protested. "You would have been fine. Someone else would have helped." "Would they?" Michael interrupted gently. "Emma, our van broke down outside 3 other establishments before we reached yours. One was already closed. One was a bar where the bouncer took one look at us and told us they were at capacity. One was a convenience store where the clerk told us to call 911 and locked the door. You were the 4th place we reached, and we were starting to lose hope. Thomas was showing signs of hypothermia. Christopher couldn't feel his feet. If we'd had to keep walking in that storm, looking for help—" He shook his head. "Who knows what would have happened? If you're feeling inspired by this story, I'd be honored if you'd like and subscribe. It helps us continue creating content that celebrates acts of kindness." "We didn't tell you who we were that night for a reason," Richard added. "We wanted to see how people treat strangers when there's nothing to gain from it. We spend our lives being treated a certain way because of our positions, our wealth, our power. People want things from us, always. But you just saw 8 cold, scared men who needed help. And you gave it without hesitation, without calculation, without any expectation of reward. That's just being human," I said softly. "It should be," William agreed. "But it isn't always, especially not when helping comes at personal cost. Your time, your safety, your resources. You stayed open when you should have gone home. You shared food that represented your inventory and your profit. You welcomed strangers into your space when you were alone and vulnerable. That kind of compassion, that kind of instinctive goodness, it's rare, and it's valuable beyond measure." We talked for hours that evening, much like we had during the storm. But this time, the conversation was different, deeper, more personal. They told me about their companies, their challenges, their hopes for what they could accomplish beyond just making money. I told them about my dreams for the restaurant, my mother's recovery journey, the free meal program I'd started. "You used the money we gave you to feed other people for free?" David asked, sounding amazed. "Some of it," I confirmed. "What else would I do? You gave me more than I needed, so I'm passing it forward. It's what my mother would do. It's what anyone should do." Before they left that evening, Robert pulled me aside. "Emma, I hope you know that if you ever need anything, advice, connections, resources, whatever, you have 8 friends you can call on. We meant it when we said we wouldn't forget that night. You changed us, made us remember why we got into business in the first place. Not for the money or the power, but to make a difference, to contribute something meaningful to the world. You already gave me everything," I said, tears threatening again. You gave me my mother's life. You gave us ours, he replied simply. And you did it with such grace and generosity that you reminded us what really matters. That's a gift we can never fully repay, but we'd like to try. Over the following months, those 8 men became genuine friends. They visited the restaurant regularly, sometimes alone, sometimes in small groups, occasionally all together. They brought their families, spouses and children and grandchildren who I fed and fussed over. They introduced me to other business leaders, not as a charity case, but as someone whose perspective and insights they genuinely valued. Through their connections, Emma's Table began to thrive in ways I'd never imagined. Food critics discovered us, and articles appeared praising our honest, heartfelt cooking and commitment to community. Catering opportunities multiplied. I was able to hire more staff, to offer better wages and benefits, to create the kind of workplace I'd always dreamed of. But the greatest gift wasn't the business success or the financial security. It was watching my mother get stronger, seeing color return to her cheeks, hearing her laugh with genuine joy. 6 months after starting treatment, her scans showed no evidence of active disease. The word the doctors used was remission, but to me, it sounded like miracle. You saved my life, she told me one evening, sitting in the restaurant after hours, much as those 8 men had done during the storm. They saved your life, I corrected gently. Those 8 incredibly generous men who somehow found their way to our door. She shook her head, her eyes, so like my own, sharp and clear. No, sweetheart, you saved my life long before that night. You saved it every day by being exactly who you are, kind, generous, compassionate, strong. Those men saw that in you. They recognized it because it's rare and precious. They didn't give you that money just because I was sick. They gave it because you were worth investing in, because your goodness deserved to be rewarded, because they wanted to see what you would do with the burden of worry lifted from your shoulders. What did I do? I asked, though I thought I knew the answer. Exactly what they hoped, she said, smiling. You kept being yourself. You took care of me, you improved your restaurant, and you started feeding others who needed help. You proved that goodness doesn't diminish when it's rewarded. It multiplies. I'd love for you to like and subscribe if this story resonates with you. Your support helps spread messages of hope and human kindness. A year after that snowy February night, we held a special dinner at Emma's Table. The 8 men were all there, along with my mother, my staff, and several people who'd been helped by our free meal program. The restaurant looked beautiful, not fancy, but warm and welcoming. Every surface gleaming, flowers on every table, the scent of good food filling the air. I stood at the center of the room and raised my glass. I've spent the past year trying to find the right words to thank 8 remarkable men who changed my life with a single act of extraordinary generosity. I've written speeches in my head, practiced expressions of gratitude, tried to articulate what it means to be given hope when you're drowning in despair. I looked at each of them, Robert, James, William, David, Michael, Thomas, Christopher, Richard, seeing not powerful CEOs, but friends who'd trusted me with their vulnerability and responded to mine with compassion. But I've realized that the best thank you I can offer isn't words. It's this. I gestured around the room. A thriving restaurant where people are fed with care and respect. A community program that passes forward the generosity you showed me. A life lived in service to others, with gratitude as my foundation and compassion as my guide. You gave me the gift of being able to focus on what matters most. People, connection, love, made tangible through food and care. My mother stood then, her hand finding mine. You also gave me my daughter back, she said, her voice steady despite the tears in her eyes. For a while, she was so burdened with worry about me that she forgot to take care of herself, to enjoy her own life. Your gift freed her from that weight. You gave her back her joy, and in doing so, you helped me heal in ways that go beyond medicine. Robert raised his own glass. Emma, you keep thanking us, but you've got it backward. We've all become better people because of knowing you. We've become more thoughtful about how we use our resources, more intentional about looking for opportunities to help, more willing to trust our instincts about human goodness. You taught us that it's not about grand gestures or recognition. It's about seeing someone who needs help and simply offering it, without calculation or expectation. To Emma, James added, who reminded 8 cynical businessmen that there's still magic in the world, and that the best kind of magic is the simple, extraordinary grace of human kindness. To Emma, they echoed, and the room filled with the sound of glasses clinking, of laughter and conversation, of people connecting over good food and shared stories. Later that evening, after most guests had left and I was cleaning up with my staff, Maria pulled me aside. "You know what's amazing?" she said. "This whole story, the storm, the men, the money, your mom's recovery, it could have been a fairy tale. But it's real. It actually happened." She was right. It was real. 8 strangers had stumbled into my restaurant during a storm, and I'd helped them without knowing who they were or what they could do for me. They'd responded to my kindness with extraordinary generosity that saved my mother's life and transformed my future. And through it all, we'd discovered something fundamental about human nature. That goodness begets goodness, that compassion creates ripples that extend far beyond the initial act, that sometimes the universe aligns in ways that feel miraculous, but are simply the result of people choosing to see each other's humanity and respond with open hearts. I thought about the moment I'd looked out the window and seen those 8 shapes in the storm, and how easily I could have made a different choice. I could have called 911 and stayed safely inside. I could have convinced myself that someone else would help them, that it wasn't my responsibility, that I had my own problems to worry about. But I hadn't. And that choice, that single moment of deciding to open my door to strangers in need, had created a cascade of miracles that continued to unfold. The restaurant became something more than just a business after that year. It became a symbol, though I never intended it that way. People heard the story. Despite our best efforts to keep it quiet, news somehow spread, and they wanted to be part of it. Some came to eat, curious about the place where such an extraordinary event had occurred. Others came to volunteer for our free meal program, inspired by the idea of paying forward kindness. Still others came simply to experience what one reviewer called the most loving food in Denver. I was careful with the attention. I never wanted Emma's table to become a tourist attraction or for our story to be reduced to a feel-good headline. The 8 men were equally protective of their privacy and mine, rarely discussing what had happened publicly. When pressed, Robert would simply say, "We encountered exceptional kindness during a difficult moment, and we responded appropriately." The real story is about the everyday generosity that exists all around us, if we're willing to see it and honor it. My mother became involved in the restaurant too, once her health stabilized. She didn't cook. The treatments had left her with some lingering fatigue, but she worked the front of house several days a week, greeting customers with the same warmth and grace she'd shown me throughout my life. People loved her. She had a gift for making everyone feel welcomed, for remembering their names and their orders, for asking about their lives with genuine interest. "This is what I always dreamed for you," she told me one quiet Tuesday afternoon, the 2 of us sitting together in the empty restaurant between lunch and dinner service. Not just success or financial security, though those things matter, but this, a life filled with purpose and connection, where you get to do what you love and make a difference at the same time. "I couldn't have any of this without you," I reminded her. "Everything good in my life traces back to lessons you taught me." She squeezed my hand. "And everything I taught you, you've multiplied and shared with others. That's the true measure of success, not what you accumulate for yourself, but what you pass forward to the world." If this story is inspiring you, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe. Your support means we can keep sharing these powerful reminders of human goodness. 2 years after that February night, David Rodriguez from Rodriguez Pharmaceuticals reached out with an unusual proposal. His company was developing a new community health initiative and wanted to partner with local businesses that demonstrated commitment to serving vulnerable populations. "Your free meal program caught our attention," he explained over coffee at Emma's table. "But it's more than that. It's your philosophy, your approach, the way you've built something that's simultaneously a business and a community resource. We'd like to provide funding to expand what you're doing, not just free meals, but nutrition education, cooking classes for low-income families, partnerships with local shelters, and food banks." "Why?" I asked, though I was already imagining the possibilities. "Because 2 years ago, a chef I barely knew shared her story about caring for her sick mother. And it reminded me why I got into pharmaceuticals in the first place, he said quietly. Not to maximize profits or dominate markets, but to help people access the care they need to live healthy, fulfilling lives. You've built something here that addresses health from a different angle, through nutrition, through community, through dignity and respect. I want to help you scale that impact. The partnership that emerged from that conversation transformed Emma's Table again. We expanded into a second location, focused entirely on our community programs. We hired nutritionists and educators. We developed curricula for teaching people how to cook healthy meals on limited budgets. We partnered with local hospitals and clinics to provide medically tailored meals for people managing chronic conditions. And all 8 men became involved, each in ways that leveraged their unique expertise and resources. James Mitchell's tech company developed an app that connected people with our meal programs and educational resources. William Chen's investment firm helped me navigate the complexities of expansion while maintaining our mission and values. Michael O'Brien's energy company ensured our facilities were sustainable and cost-efficient. Thomas Anderson's media group helped us share nutritional education content widely. Christopher Johnson's aerospace company, surprisingly, pioneered food delivery logistics that got meals to homebound seniors. Richard Williams Financial Holdings provided grant funding for nutritional research and program evaluation. They didn't do these things for publicity or tax benefits, though those certainly existed. They did them because that night in the storm had genuinely changed them, had reminded them of their own capacity for compassion and their responsibility to use their resources for good. We were trapped in our own kind of storm before we met you, Robert told me during one of our regular lunch meetings, which had become a tradition. Not a weather storm, but a philosophical one. We'd achieved everything we thought we wanted: wealth, power, influence, and yet we felt hollow. We'd lost sight of why any of it mattered. You reminded us. You showed us what it looks like to live with integrity and compassion, to put people before profit without sacrificing excellence. I'm just a chef who helped some people during a snowstorm, I protested, as I always did when the conversation turned this direction. You're a woman who embodies the kind of values we'd stopped believing existed in the modern world, he corrected gently. And you've built something remarkable, not despite those values, but because of them. That's the lesson we needed to learn. That's the gift you gave us. 3 years after that transformative night, I received an unexpected phone call. It was from a producer at a major network who had somehow heard our story and wanted to feature it in a documentary series about extraordinary acts of kindness. I was hesitant. The last thing I wanted was to exploit what had been a deeply personal experience to turn sacred moments into entertainment. But after consulting with the 8 men, my mother, and my staff, I reconsidered. If sharing this story inspires even one person to help a stranger or gives hope to someone who's struggling, maybe it's worth the discomfort, my mother reasoned. Your story isn't just about you, Emma. It's about all of us, about the potential for goodness that exists in every human interaction. The documentary aired on a Tuesday evening in November. We watched it together, all of us crammed into Emma's Table after hours, nervous and excited and uncertain what to expect. The filmmaker had done something I hadn't anticipated. She'd interwoven our story with others, showing a pattern of kindness and reciprocity that played out across different contexts and cultures. There was the teacher who'd bought winter coats for her struggling students and later received an anonymous donation that fully funded her classroom for years. There was the mechanic who'd fixed a stranded family's car for free and later learned that family had started a scholarship fund in his name. There was the nurse who'd stayed late to comfort a dying patient and discovered that patient had left her their house in gratitude. Our story was part of this larger tapestry, an illustration of a fundamental human truth, that compassion creates ripples, that generosity begets generosity, that the universe has a way of rewarding goodness even when we don't act with that expectation. Please consider liking and subscribing if this message resonates with you. Your engagement helps these stories of hope reach people who need them most. The response to the documentary was overwhelming. Emma's Table's website crashed from traffic. We received thousands of emails and messages from people sharing their own stories of unexpected kindness. The free meal program had a 6-month waiting list of volunteers. Donations poured in. Not just money, but time, skills, resources, ideas. More significantly, other restaurants began adopting similar models. A chef in Seattle reached out asking for advice on starting a free meal program. A restaurateur in Miami wanted to partner on nutrition education. A culinary school in Chicago incorporated our community-focused philosophy into their curriculum. The 8 men were thrilled. "This is exactly what we hoped would happen," Christopher said during one of our now regular group dinners. "Not that your story would make you famous, but that it would inspire others to look for opportunities to help, to recognize that business and compassion aren't mutually exclusive, to understand that success means nothing if it's not shared." But the most meaningful response came from unexpected places. I received a letter from a young woman in Montana who wrote, "3 months ago, I was closing my small bakery late at night when I saw a family huddled outside in the cold. Their car had broken down. I almost didn't help. I was tired. I had problems of my own. I didn't know them. But I thought of your story, and I brought them inside. I gave them food and warmth and called for help. They turned out to be refugees, newly arrived in America, terrified and lost. Helping them that night connected me with an organization that supports refugee families. And now I donate bread to them weekly. I've met the most amazing people. My bakery has become a community hub. My life has more meaning than it ever did before. Thank you for showing me what's possible when we choose compassion over convenience." I read that letter aloud to my mother, my voice breaking on the last sentences. "Do you see what's happening?" I asked her. "One act of kindness is multiplying into dozens, hundreds, maybe thousands of other acts. It's like," I struggled for the right words, "like ripples in water," she finished softly. "You throw one stone and the ripples spread outward, touching shores you never imagined reaching. That's always how goodness works, sweetheart. We just don't always get to see it happen." 4 years after the storm, Emma's Table had evolved into something I could never have imagined during those desperate days when I was trying to figure out how to save my mother's life. We had 3 locations now: the original restaurant, the community center, and a culinary training facility where we taught job skills to people trying to rebuild their lives. We employed 47 people, many of whom had been clients of our free meal program first. Maria had become my partner, helping manage the expanding operations. Tommy, the dishwasher who'd been putting himself through community college when the storm hit, had graduated with a business degree and now ran our financial operations. My mother was thriving. 5 years in remission, healthy and energetic, traveling during her free time just as she'd dreamed. She'd been to the ocean, all 3 of them actually, and hiked in the Rockies and visited national parks and taken a cruise through Alaska. She sent me photos from her adventures, her smile brilliant and genuine, her eyes alive with joy. The 8 men remained close friends, their own lives transformed in ways both subtle and profound. Robert had restructured his company to prioritize environmental sustainability and worker welfare, taking a financial hit initially, but ultimately building a more resilient and respected organization. James had launched a Tech for Good initiative that provided free technology training in underserved communities. Williams' investment firm now maintained a fund specifically for supporting mission-driven entrepreneurs who might not qualify for traditional financing. Each of them had found their own way of taking the lesson from that snowy night and applying it to their spheres of influence. Not in grand, sweeping gestures, but in daily choices about how to use their power and resources, how to treat people, what values to prioritize. "We were good businessmen before we met you," David told me once. "But we weren't good men. Not really. We'd lost track of what mattered in our pursuit of what we thought mattered. You gave that back to us." I never quite knew what to say when they spoke like that. It still felt disproportionate. My simple act of opening a door weighed against their extraordinary generosity and the ongoing ways they chose to honor what had passed between us. But perhaps that was the point. Perhaps goodness isn't meant to be measured or balanced or reduced to equivalent exchanges. Perhaps it's simply meant to flow, person to person, moment to moment, creating connection and meaning and hope wherever it touches. On the 5th anniversary of that February night, we held another dinner at Emma's Table. But this time, it wasn't just the 9 of us and a few close friends. It was everyone whose life had been touched by what happened. People who'd been fed through our programs, people who'd been trained in our culinary facility, people who'd been inspired by our story to start their own kindness initiatives. The restaurant couldn't hold everyone, so we expanded into the parking lot, setting up heated tents and outdoor heaters, stringing lights through the cold February air. It was nothing like the blizzard that had brought us together, just a crisp, clear winter evening with stars visible above the city lights. I stood before the assembled crowd, feeling the weight of the moment, the significance of all these lives intersecting because of a single choice made 5 years ago. Before I share the final part of this incredible journey, I'd be so grateful if you'd like this video and subscribe to our channel. Your support allows us to continue sharing stories that remind us of our shared humanity. 5 years ago tonight, I began, my breath forming clouds in the cold air. 8 strangers stumbled into my life during a snowstorm. I helped them because it was the right thing to do, because they were human beings in need, because I couldn't imagine doing anything else. I didn't know who they were. I didn't expect anything in return. I certainly didn't imagine that one evening would transform my life so completely. I looked at the 8 men standing together near the front of the crowd. These 8 remarkable people responded to my kindness with extraordinary generosity that saved my mother's life and changed my future. But more than that, they've taught me something profound about the nature of goodness. It's not about grand gestures or recognition or evening the scales. It's about creating a cycle, receiving kindness and passing it forward, being helped and then helping others, taking what we're given and multiplying it through our own acts of compassion. My mother stepped forward to join me. She looked radiant, healthy, fully alive. 5 years ago, I was dying, she said, her voice clear and strong. Not just from cancer, but from the heartbreak of watching my daughter sacrifice everything trying to save me. Emma would never have let me go. She would have worked herself into the ground, bankrupted herself, given up every dream, all to buy me a few more months. She turned to the 8 men. You didn't just save my life. You saved hers. You freed her to be the person she was meant to be, not defined by desperate struggle, but by joyful service. You gave her back her future, and in doing so, you've touched hundreds of lives. Every person who's been fed or trained or helped through Emma's Table exists in this form because you chose generosity. That's the true measure of your gift. Robert stepped forward then, his silver hair gleaming in the string lights. We've spent 5 years trying to understand what happened that night, why it affected us so profoundly. I think I finally understand. We were lost, successful by every conventional measure but spiritually bankrupt, having forgotten why wealth and power matter at all. Emma reminded us. She showed us that the only meaningful measure of success is how we treat people, especially when no one is watching, especially when there's nothing to be gained. We 8 men controlled billions of dollars and employed hundreds of thousands of people, James added. But none of that mattered when we were freezing in a broken-down van, genuinely frightened and unsure if we'd find help. In that moment, we were just human beings in need, and a woman we didn't know, who had no reason to help us and plenty of reasons not to, opened her door without hesitation. That's power. That's what matters. The crowd was silent, absorbed in the story being told and retold, examining it from new angles. Then a voice called out from the back, a woman I recognized from our free meal program. I want to say something, she said, stepping forward. She was young, maybe 30, with tired eyes that had seen too much hardship. 2 years ago, I was homeless. I'd lost my job, my apartment, my hope. I hadn't eaten a real meal in 3 days when someone told me about Emma's Table and the free dinners. I almost didn't come. I was ashamed, didn't want to be seen as a charity case. Her voice strengthened. But I came. And Emma didn't just feed me. She looked at me, really looked like I mattered, like I was a person worthy of respect and care. She asked about my life. She listened. And when she learned I used to work in food service, she offered me training, then a job. Now I'm the night manager at the community center location. I have an apartment. I'm rebuilding my life. And last week, I was able to help someone else the way Emma helped me. Others stepped forward then, one by one, sharing their own stories. The refugee family who'd been welcomed and supported. the elderly man who'd been receiving home-delivered meals and had found renewed purpose volunteering to call and check on other homebound seniors, the teenager who'd attended our cooking classes and discovered a passion that led to culinary school. Each story was different, but they all shared a common thread. Someone had been helped, and they'd taken that help and multiplied it, passing forward kindness in their own ways, creating new ripples that spread outward into the world. As I listened to them speak, I felt something like awe at the mysterious mathematics of compassion, how one act can become 10, which become 100, which become countless moments of grace and connection rippling out beyond any possible tracking or measurement. "This is what we dreamed of," Christopher said quietly, standing beside me as the testimonials continued. "Not that you'd become famous or that we'd be celebrated for our generosity, but this, people helping people, kindness multiplying, a community built on the understanding that we're all connected and we all have responsibility for each other's well-being." "It's bigger than any of us now," I agreed. "It has its own life, its own momentum. All we can do is keep feeding it, literally and figuratively." He laughed at that, the sound warm in the cold night air. "You know what the most radical thing about your approach is? You never made people feel small for needing help. You never turned kindness into a transaction where one person is superior and the other is indebted. You treated everyone, us that night in the storm, the people who come for free meals, the students in your training programs, with exactly the same dignity and respect. That's revolutionary." I thought about that, about how much of my philosophy had come from my mother, who'd always insisted that everyone deserved to be treated with respect regardless of their circumstances. "It's not revolutionary," I said finally. "It's just human. Or at least, it's how humans should treat each other. We've just forgotten that, gotten distracted by hierarchies and categories and artificial divisions." "Then maybe your real gift is remembering," he suggested, "and reminding the rest of us. If you've been moved by this story, please take a moment to like and subscribe. These messages of hope and humanity are what this channel exists to share." The evening stretched on, people sharing food and stories, the February cold kept at bay by heaters and human warmth. Children played in the snow at the edges of the parking lot, their laughter ringing through the air. Someone started singing, and others joined in, harmonies weaving together in the winter night. I found myself standing slightly apart from the crowd at one point, just watching, trying to absorb and remember every detail. My mother found me there, slipping her arm through mine. "What are you thinking?" she asked. "That I used to not believe in fairy tales," I said. "I thought life was hard work and sacrifice and doing your best with limited resources. I thought miracles were for other people, for stories, for a world that didn't really exist. And now? Now I think maybe miracles are just kindness amplified," I said slowly, working through the thought. Maybe magic is what happens when people choose compassion over convenience, when they see each other's humanity and respond to it. Maybe the extraordinary has been available all along, hiding in ordinary moments, waiting for someone to recognize it and give it space to grow. She squeezed my arm. "You've always been my miracle, Emma. From the moment you were born, you've been teaching me about the better parts of human nature. Everything you've built, everything you've inspired, it all started with who you are at your core. Kind, generous, unable to see someone in need without helping. Those 8 men recognized that in you. They saw something rare and precious and worth protecting. So they protected it, nurtured it, gave it room to flourish. They saved you," I reminded her, tears threatening as they always did when I thought about how close I'd come to losing her. "They saved us both," she corrected. "They gave me life and they gave you freedom from the crushing weight of trying to save me alone. But Emma, you have to understand this. They only gave you what you'd already earned through a lifetime of choosing kindness. This isn't a fairy tale where you were randomly blessed by magic. This is the story of someone who lived according to her values even when it was difficult, and who was recognized and rewarded for that integrity. That's not magic. That's justice." I turned to look at her fully, this woman who'd given me everything, who'd shaped me with her example and her love. "How did you get so wise?" She smiled. "By raising a daughter who taught me as much as I taught her. By surviving cancer and learning that every moment is precious, by watching what happens when goodness is allowed to flourish unimpeded by cynicism or fear. You've shown me what's possible, sweetheart. You and those 8 men and everyone here tonight. You're proving that another way of living is possible, one based on mutual care and shared humanity rather than competition and scarcity. As midnight approached, I gathered everyone together one final time. I want to close this evening with a challenge, I said. Not to be like me, I'm just a chef who made one choice on one cold night, but to be like the best version of yourself, to recognize that every day presents opportunities for kindness, for connection, for choosing compassion over convenience. You don't need millions of dollars or powerful friends or extraordinary circumstances. You just need to see someone who needs help and decide to offer it. I gestured to the 8 men. These gentlemen changed my life with their generosity, but I'd like to think that we all changed each other that night. They reminded me that goodness can be rewarded, that the universe sometimes aligns in mysterious ways. I reminded them why success and wealth matter, not as ends in themselves, but as tools for serving others. We created something together that night, a compact of sorts, a commitment to living in a way that honors our shared humanity. So here's my challenge. Find your own storm. Find your own moment where you can choose to help or walk away, and choose to help. Maybe nothing miraculous will happen. Maybe you'll just be cold and inconvenienced and out some resources. But maybe, just maybe, you'll create your own ripple, start your own cascade of kindness that spreads in ways you can't predict or control. And if you're the one who needs help, if you're standing in a storm of your own, feeling desperate and alone, know that there are people like you here tonight who will open their doors. You're not alone. You're part of this vast, complicated, beautiful web of humanity, and we take care of each other. That's what we do. That's who we are when we're at our best. The crowd was silent for a moment after I finished, the weight of words settling over them. Then applause broke out. Not the polite applause of formal events, but genuine, enthusiastic appreciation. People were crying, including several of the 8 men. As the gathering finally began to disperse, people heading home through the clear winter night, Robert approached me one last time. "You know what I've learned over these 5 years?" he said. "That the night we met, you wasn't an ending or even a beginning. It was a continuation of a story that's always been unfolding, will always be unfolding, as long as people choose kindness over indifference. We happened to intersect with your story at a crucial moment, but you'd have found a way to save your mother regardless. You'd have kept being generous and compassionate regardless, because that's who you are. And you 8 would have found your way back to your values eventually," I countered, "because that's who you are underneath the titles and the wealth and the pressures of your positions. We needed each other that night. We reminded each other of what matters." He nodded slowly. "Mutual salvation. I like that better than the fairy tale version where we swoop in and rescue you. We rescued each other." "We did," I agreed. "And then we took that rescue and multiplied it, shared it, turned it into something bigger than any of us. That's the real story, not the money or the storm or the dramatic reveals. It's what we chose to do with the gift of that night, how we honored it by living differently. Thank you so much for watching this story. If it touched your heart, please like this video and subscribe to our channel. Together, we can spread more stories of hope and remind each other of the goodness that exists in the world." 5 years after a snowstorm brought 8 strangers to my door, I stood in Emma's table on a quiet Wednesday morning, watching early light filter through the windows. The restaurant was peaceful, waiting for the day's activity to begin. I could smell fresh bread baking, hear the familiar sounds of preparation from the kitchen. My mother was healthy. My business was thriving. I had friends who'd stood by me through transformation and growth. I had purpose and meaning and the daily joy of doing work I loved. But more than any of that, I had proof, living, breathing, multiplying proof that kindness matters, that compassion creates ripples, that choosing to help someone, even when it's inconvenient or scary or costs you something, is always the right choice. That snowy February night, I opened my door to 8 cold strangers, and they responded by opening doors for me. Doors to possibility and hope and a future I'd stopped daring to imagine. We'd created something together, something that continued to grow and spread and touch lives in ways none of us could have predicted. Some people would call it a miracle. Others might call it luck, or fate, or divine intervention. I call it something simpler and more profound: humanity at its best. People seeing each other's needs and responding with open hearts. People recognizing that we're all connected, all vulnerable, all deserving of care and dignity. The money changed my circumstances, but the real gift was the reminder that goodness exists, that generosity begets generosity, that small acts of kindness can create cascades of transformation beyond anything we can imagine. I didn't save 8 lives that night. We saved each other. And then we took that salvation and shared it with hundreds of others, creating a legacy of compassion that will hopefully ripple forward long after we're gone. That's not a fairy tale. That's the story of what's possible when we choose love over fear, when we prioritize connection over convenience, when we remember that beneath all our differences, we're simply human beings trying to find our way through this complicated, beautiful, heartbreaking, miraculous world. And sometimes, just sometimes, the world responds to our kindness with miracles wrapped in snowstorms and delivered by strangers who become friends, who become family, who become proof that the best parts of human nature are still alive and worth believing in. That's my story. That's our story. And I hope, with everything in me, that it inspires you to write your own chapter in this never-ending tale of human goodness, one small act of kindness at a time. Thank you for taking this journey with me. Please like this video and subscribe to our channel. And remember, your own opportunity to create miracles is waiting, perhaps just on the other side of your door, in the midst of someone else's storm. Choose kindness, choose compassion, choose to open your door. The rest, as I've learned, takes care of itself.